Let me tell you something that might sound strange coming from me. I'm a 34-year-old housewife living out in the countryside. And honestly, I've become quite the hunter. Not for deer or anything fancy like that. No, I hunt bugs. Every year, as the seasons shift and the climate plays its little games, our quiet little house becomes a 5-star resort for all kinds of pests. At this point, I don't scream when I see a bug. I don't even flinch. I swat. I spray. I conquer. I've gotten tougher with age, emotionally and physically. It's wild how life does that to you. Anyway, I didn't bring you here to talk about bugs. What I want to share is a story that stayed with me for years. It's about betrayal, family drama, and how I stood my ground when the people closest to me turned into strangers. Back when I was in my 20s, my middle school class held a reunion. I was nervous. Those events are always a mixed bag, right? Some people glow up, others, not so much. But what made it worth going was the unexpected encounter with my childhood friend James. I hadn't seen him in years. James and I used to live in the same neighborhood. Back in elementary school, it was me, my little sister Victoria, she's 2 years younger, and James. The three of us were inseparable. We'd ride bikes, build forts, and catch bugs together. He was sweet, goofy, and endlessly curious. But then the middle school phase hit hard, and James started pulling away. You know, that boys don't play with girls nonsense. Eventually, his family moved, and we lost touch. So there I was, standing in the middle of a reunion hall, drink in hand, when I saw him. And you know what? It felt like no time had passed. I think alcohol deserves some credit there. It helped melt away the years and the awkwardness. We ended up chatting like old times, laughing, teasing, catching up on life. After a few more drinks and a couple of after parties, just the two of us, James dropped a bomb. "I used to like you when we were kids," he said, his voice a little hesitant. "And I think I still do." I blinked, then I laughed. What is that even supposed to mean? Well, want to date and see what happens? And just like that, we were dating. It started lighthearted, but something about reconnecting with someone who'd known you before life got complicated. It felt real. I still remember the next morning, a very sober James rolling on the floor groaning, "What was I thinking?" I laughed so hard, I cried. Watching someone you like get all flustered because of you, it's honestly kind of adorable. Fast forward a few months and we were engaged. It all happened so smoothly. We went to meet each other's families, planning to move in together 6 months before the wedding, just to make sure our lifestyles meshed, you know? Our parents already knew each other, small-town perks. So getting their blessing was supposed to be the easy part. But of course, life had other plans, and those plans came in the form of my little sister, Victoria. We were sitting at the dinner table, having a nice meal with my parents when the front door opened. "I'm home!" Victoria called out, clearly exhausted from work. But the moment she stepped into the room and saw James sitting there, something shifted in her eyes. "James, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice lifting with surprise and something else, something warmer. James shot me a glance, a little nervous. I jumped in to explain, "We've been dating for half a year. We're getting married. He's here to tell the family." And then, boom, her whole expression soured like she'd bitten into a lemon. "All right, I'm tired. Going to bed. Night." Slam, door shut. I sat there, stunned. James tried to brush it off. "She probably just had a long day," he said gently. "Don't worry about it." But something about her reaction stuck with me. That wasn't just tired. That was fury, and I had no idea why, until later that night. I was heading to the bathroom when I ran into her in the hallway. She looked at me with eyes so sharp they could cut glass. "I can't believe you're marrying James," she hissed. "I've always loved him. I'll never forgive you." I just stood there, mouth open. My own sister, in love with my fiancé? It felt like something out of a soap opera. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept running in circles. Was I doing something wrong? Should I step aside? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized James chose me. We were already building a life together. If Victoria had feelings for him, she should have said something years ago. This wasn't on me. I decided not to let her bitterness ruin what I had, but I also knew I couldn't keep it from James. He deserved to know why the atmosphere in our house had suddenly turned to ice. So the next day I told him everything. He listened quietly, then smiled. "If your sister ever attacks you, I'll be your human shield." I rolled my eyes. "Don't joke about that." But that was how we decided to handle it. We weren't going to let it ruin us. If she couldn't accept it, That was her problem. Unfortunately, Victoria didn't just disapprove. She went full villain mode. First, she drained the bathtub right before I was about to use it. Then she started hiding my makeup and my wallet before work. I was late twice that week, and my boss gave me this condescending look like, "Getting lazy now that you're getting married?" I tried to laugh it off, but inside I was furious. Still, I kept telling myself, I'm the older sister. I need to be the bigger person. Eventually, my parents noticed something was off. My mom confronted Victoria. "Why are you acting so childish?" My dad, though, he took her side. Turns out he'd always had a soft spot for Victoria. When we were little, Mom got sick, and Dad had to take care of her. He developed this weird, protective, almost maternal instinct for her. And now he thought I had stolen the love of her life. He even said it out loud. "I can't stand to see the younger sister abandoned." It broke my heart. I wasn't the villain here. I wasn't the one lying or acting out. But I didn't want to argue. I just wanted peace. So James and I decided to move out earlier than planned. We needed space. From the drama, from the judgment, from my sister's petty attacks. And you know what? That turned out to be the best decision we ever made. Life with James felt like a fresh breath of air once we moved out. We weren't surrounded by passive-aggressive comments, mysterious missing items, or the constant tension that had taken over my family home. I could finally relax, cook meals in peace, and actually laugh again without worrying if Victoria was going to set my toothbrush on fire or something. A few weeks into our new setup, my mom called. "You know, Ellen," she said gently, "I think you did the right thing. You're an adult. You get to choose how you live. Just live happily. That's all I want." I teared up. That was the first time I felt truly supported since everything started. My dad, on the other hand, stayed cold and distant. He didn't say much, but I could tell he hadn't come around. Maybe he thought the whole thing would blow over. Maybe he thought I'd come running home in tears, admitting James wasn't the one. Whatever it was, he clearly hadn't prepared himself for what came next. Our wedding was small, simple, no grand venues or dramatic entrances, but it was filled with love, most of it anyway. Victoria didn't show up. No surprise there. My dad was there, but even as I walked down the aisle, he leaned over and whispered, "It's not too late to change your mind." I almost tripped. My mom thankfully brought things back to earth with her own version of comfort. "You know, there were days I regretted marrying your father too, so just be ready for anything." Behind us, I swear I heard Dad whisper, "Wait, what?" It was chaotic. It was messy. And not everyone was thrilled for us. But we got married. We said "I do," exchanged rings, kissed, and danced badly at our reception. I thought that was the end of the drama. I thought we were in the clear. I was wrong. The very next morning, someone slammed on our door like they were the FBI. James and I scrambled out of bed and ran to the intercom monitor. It was my entire family, Mom, Dad, and Victoria. "What now?" James muttered, half asleep and already regretting opening his eyes. I opened the door slowly, like I was expecting someone to throw a pie in my face. Victoria didn't wait a second. "I didn't want to say anything before, but I'm pregnant with James's baby." Boom! My stomach dropped. What did she just say? James blinked behind me, his hair sticking up in all directions. He looked more like a bewildered muppet than a cheating husband. My dad added fuel to the fire. "He needs to take responsibility. You two don't have children yet, right? He should break it off with you and marry Victoria." I stood there frozen. For a full 5 seconds, I just stared. Then I turned to Victoria. "How far along are you?" 2 months, she snapped, chin raised like she expected applause. And then something happened. I looked at James. He looked at me. And then we both burst out laughing. Not polite giggles, not awkward chuckles. I mean full-on can't breathe, crying with laughter hysterics. My parents just stood there confused and increasingly horrified. "What are you laughing at?" Victoria screeched. James wiped his eyes. "So it was 2 months ago, huh? You remember that time, Ellen?" "Oh yes," I said, smirking. "We had a blast." James turned to Victoria, totally straight-faced. "Quick question. How many abs do I have?" She blinked. "What?" "You know, from when we apparently slept together. How many?" She hesitated. 10? "Wrong!" he shouted like he was hosting a game show. "I don't even have abs. Not a single one. I lost them in college. Ask Ellen." I was trying not to cry from laughing. But James wasn't done. "Next question. How many moles do I have on my back?" Victoria looked completely lost. "This is ridiculous." "Exactly!" James clapped his hands like he'd just solved a murder mystery. "You have no idea because we never slept together. This is a lie." My mom, who had been trying to hold it together, finally cracked and started laughing too. My dad, though, stayed stone-faced. James sighed dramatically. "Okay, you want the truth? During that time 2 months ago, I got stung by a bee." "A bee?" my mom echoed. "Yep, a bee on the, important male region." The room went quiet for about 2 seconds. Then my mom doubled over laughing. "No way," Victoria snapped. "Oh, it's true," James said proudly. "It was a hot day. I decided to air out. Window open, fan blowing, nature in full bloom, and bam, bee flies in and ruins everything. I nearly passed out from trying to hold in my laughter." James was turning red from his ears to his toes, but he kept going. "I had to call an ambulance," he said dramatically. "You think I was making babies in that state? I could barely sit down." Even my dad finally cracked a smile. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." "Exactly," James replied. "No one would make that up unless it was true." Then James looked at Victoria, his tone shifting. "I respect you as a childhood friend and as Ellen's sister, but you need to stop lying. You're hurting everyone here, especially yourself." I stepped forward. "Even if you keep saying these things, James and I aren't splitting up. And I don't hate you, Victoria. You're still my sister, but this is too much." Victoria's face twisted in anger. "I don't like James anymore anyway. Not if he's on your side." James gently pulled me behind him. "I love Ellen. That won't change. And if you keep making things up, I'll stand up to every single one." My heart almost burst. He didn't even sound like the guy who once tripped over his own shoelaces and blamed gravity. He sounded like a husband, my husband. My dad finally stepped in, looking at Victoria. "If you're really pregnant, then prove it. Medical records, anything." Victoria just stood there, trembling. My mom nodded. "If this is a lie, then you need to apologize. Not just to James, but to Ellen, too." "No one's on my side," Victoria whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't care anymore." And with that, she ran out the door. 2 weeks later, my mom dragged her, literally, to the doctor. No baby, no illness, no excuse. My parents apologized profusely. "We're sorry for not believing you, Ellen. James, we're so sorry." I told them I didn't blame them. Not really, because even with everything that had happened, they were still my parents, and I knew deep down they thought they were protecting their daughter. But this time, their kindness had backfired. After that dramatic showdown and the hospital visit that proved Victoria's pregnancy was one big, fat lie, you'd think we could finally move on. I certainly thought so. My parents, bless them, seemed genuinely remorseful, and my mom even started coming around to help with errands and food prep. We weren't exactly back to Sunday brunches and warm group hugs, but it was progress. Victoria, however, disappeared. She left the house not long after the lie was exposed. My dad, who once would have gone after her with his wallet and car keys in hand, told my mom, "Let her cool off. Maybe she'll grow up." My mother agreed. "She needs to learn actions have consequences. This wasn't a harmless white lie. She tried to destroy your sister's marriage." It was the first time I ever saw both my parents draw the line with her. Time went on. James and I adjusted to married life. We weren't perfect. He snored like a freight train, and I had a bad habit of reorganizing things in the fridge, just as he learned where everything was. But we were solid. We had inside jokes, shared playlists, and weird little routines like Sunday morning battle cleaning, where we'd run around the house with vacuums and cleaning spray, trying to out-clean each other like it was a sport. Then 7 years passed. Yes, 7. We had moved houses twice, traveled a bit, and, surprise, welcomed 4 kids into the world. Well, technically 3 pregnancies. 2 of our kids are twins, and let me tell you, that was a wild ride. James took to fatherhood like a duck to water, though with significantly more hair loss. Our kids adored him, even when they used him as a climbing gym or pulled on his thinning hair like it was their job. Life was chaotic, loud, and filled with crayon art on the walls. But it was ours, and it was beautiful. That's when Victoria returned. She called my mom out of the blue, said she wanted to come home, to apologize. I'll admit, I was skeptical. But people change, right? Maybe 7 years away had given her clarity. Maybe the girl who used to lie about fake pregnancies had grown up. She moved back in with my parents. Things were quiet at first. She kept to herself. My dad remained cautious, and my mom gave her space while gently reminding her that respect was a two-way street. Then came the holidays. Our big end-of-year family gathering was something we hadn't done in a long time. But with Victoria back, my parents thought it might help heal old wounds. James and I came with the kids. They ran wild through the house, high on candy and Christmas magic. Everyone seemed to be getting along. Victoria even helped set the table. She smiled at James once, but it felt forced, flat. I told myself not to overthink it. Later that evening, James and I went to bed early. We were exhausted from playing with the kids all day and digesting a buffet's worth of food. I barely remembered falling asleep. But then I woke up to the sound of him screaming. Like full-on horror movie, I'm being murdered screaming. Ah! I jumped up, nearly falling off the bed, and flicked on the lamp. What I saw next made my blood run cold. Victoria, in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of James's side of the bed like a scene from a ghost story. James was pressed up against the headboard, white as a sheet, eyes wide. The kids, by some miracle, hadn't woken up, but I could already hear my parents rushing down the hallway. "What the hell, Victoria?" I shouted. She blinked like she'd just come out of a trance. "What? I just came to talk." "At midnight? In the dark? In our bedroom?" James was practically shaking. Victoria stood up, looking offended. "It's not like I touched him." My parents burst into the room, and the expression on my dad's face, I'll never forget it. It was like someone had slapped him with a bucket of reality. Victoria, who was clearly drunk, swayed a little and slurred. "It's not fair. You two are always so happy. You should share a little of that with me." My mother gasped. I grabbed a blanket and shoved it at James, who was still frozen in place. "You're insane," I hissed. My dad, pale and shaking with anger, stepped forward. "Victoria, you need to leave this house, now." "But Daddy," I said now. The gravity in his voice was unmistakable. This was the man who once coddled her, who always defended her. And now, he couldn't even look her in the eye. The next morning, after she sobered up, she apologized. She cried, begged for forgiveness, said she hadn't meant to do anything inappropriate. My mom just shook her head. "Actions taken when drunk often show who we really are." My dad said nothing. He turned his back and walked away. That was the day they disowned her. This time it was final. No more warnings, no more excuses. She was told not to come back. James, still in shock, tried to joke about it later. "I thought she was a ghost. My soul almost left my body." I hugged him tightly. "Thank you for not letting me down." He kissed my forehead. "You're my wife. I'd never let anyone, ghost or sister-in-law, come between us." The truth is, that moment shook me. Not just because of what Victoria did, but because of how far people will go when they're consumed by envy, regret, and obsession. My sister didn't just cross a line, she erased it. And yet, part of me still grieved. She was my sister. We shared bunk beds, whispered secrets at night, played pretend with cardboard boxes. And now she was just gone. Sometimes people say, family is forever. But the truth is, family is only forever if you treat it with respect and care. Otherwise, it breaks, just like anything else. The years that followed weren't perfect. Life never is. But they were good, solid, honest. After that final incident, Victoria disappeared from our lives. She didn't call, she didn't write. Not a word for birthdays, not even when the twins were born. She'd been officially disowned by my parents, and although part of me still carried a wound from that, I had to move forward. I didn't know where she went or what became of her. Sometimes I'd wonder about it late at night, while folding laundry or brushing one of the kids' hair. Did she find peace? Did she learn to love herself without needing to steal someone else's life? But then the baby monitor would crackle, or one of the twins would yell, "Mommy," from the other room, and the moment would pass. Our home was loud, chaotic, and constantly in need of tidying, but it was full of laughter. By then, I was a mother of four wild, joyful, stubborn little beings who filled our lives with noise and glitter and marker stains in places I still can't scrub clean. Technically, I'd only given birth 3 times. The twins came together, of course, but it felt like I'd run a marathon every year. My kids were born just close enough together that there was never a calm phase between baby bottles and back talk. Our youngest was going through what James and I jokingly called the no era. Everything was no. Clothes? No. Toothbrush? No. Toilet? Absolutely not. Absolutely. But in the quiet moments, when they were all finally asleep, cheeks squished against their pillows, soft snores echoing through the house, I'd stand in the hallway and feel something I could only describe as deep, raw contentment. This was my life, and I loved it. Even the walls, which by now were so covered in crayon drawings they looked like a modern art exhibit. Even the way the dog howled every time the vacuum turned on. Even the smell of mystery goo that somehow always lived under the couch. Every Sunday, James and I still did our wild house cleaning sprints. He'd dart around with a mop like a ninja, and I'd chase the kids with the vacuum. For a while, we tried to make it into a competition, but the kids always won by uncleaning everything in under 10 minutes. Despite the mess, our home was happy. James remained the rock of our household. Kind, funny, endlessly patient, even when the kids used his body as a jungle gym or pulled at his thinning hair. Ah, yes, the hair. He never really said anything, but I could see him noticing it more in the mirror, running his fingers through it, checking the back when he thought I wasn't looking. His expression would shift into something oddly serious for a guy whose kid just asked if boogers could be mailed to Santa. I never said, "It's okay, honey. We can afford fancy hair treatments now thanks to your promotion." I didn't need to. He was still the guy who once pretended to forget how many abs he had to prove a point. Still the man who stood up to my father when no one else would. Still the one who screamed like a banshee when my sister tried to crawl into bed with him like some twisted ghost from a Halloween movie. I loved every version of him. And more importantly, he loved every version of me. The exhausted me, the angry me, the me who cried over lost baby socks and burnt lasagna. He never made me feel like I had to be someone else. And my parents? They softened with time. They never forgot what happened. They never tried to pretend Victoria hadn't done what she did, but they loved our children deeply and poured themselves into helping us raise them. My mom would swing by with baked goods and fresh laundry. My dad, once so stubborn, spent afternoons building wooden toy boxes and reading fairy tales to the twins like he was auditioning for story time on public TV. One evening, I caught him sitting on our porch, watching the kids chase bubbles across the lawn. He looked at me and said, "I should have listened to you back then. I thought I was protecting Victoria. But I see now. I was hurting you." I didn't cry. I didn't need to. "I know, Dad," I said. "You were doing your best." He smiled and nodded. "You turned out just fine, didn't you?" "I think so." There's something healing about watching the people who raised you grow into better versions of themselves. My dad was never perfect, but neither was I. And in that quiet porch light, we understood each other better than we ever had. We didn't hear from Victoria again, not for a long time. And when we did, it wasn't some grand apology or redemption arc. She didn't show up with flowers or tears. She sent a letter. No return address, no dramatic confession, just a few scribbled lines. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're happy." And I was. I really, really was. I didn't write back, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to anymore. I had my closure. I had my family. I had a home filled with fingerprints on glass and love in every messy corner. Sometimes life throws you into a storm just to show you how strong you are. Sometimes it rips apart relationships to make room for the ones that truly matter. And sometimes the person who tried to break your world ends up teaching you how much you've already built. So here I am, a little older, a little wiser, with a pantry full of snacks and a bathroom that's never quiet. I'm Ellen DeGeneres, a wife, a mom, a survivor of sibling betrayal, bee stings in unfortunate places, and more laundry than any one woman should ever have to fold. And this is my happy ending.